The early morning light spilled through the cracked window, painting soft streaks of gold across the small room. She sat on a worn wooden chair, her fingers resting lightly on the keys of an old piano that had been in the house for as long as anyone could remember. Dust clung to the edges of the black and white keys, and the piano had a faintly hollow sound when pressed. Still, she felt at home here, as if the instrument had been waiting for her all these years. Her life had never been simple. Each day brought its own challenges, some heavy and some subtle, yet all left their marks. She had learned to smile through the struggles, even when the world outside seemed cold or indifferent. Music had been her refuge since she was a child, though for a long time it had been hidden, tucked away like a secret treasure that only she knew about. Today, however, there was a shift in the air, a gentle insistence that something important was about to happen. The first note she struck was soft, almost hesitant, as if testing the air. It didn't matter that the sound was a little off, or that the keys stuck slightly in certain places. She closed her eyes and let the sound flow, letting her heart guide her fingers rather than her mind. Slowly, a melody began to form, a simple tune that carried a sense of peace and warmth. There was nothing complicated about it, just a few notes flowing in a quiet rhythm. Yet it felt as though it held a universe within it. The neighbors were waking up, and she could hear the distant hum of the city outside. Cars moved along the street, people spoke and laughed as they began their day, and somewhere far off, a dog barked. Yet inside this small room, time seemed to stretch and bend around her music. Each note she played seemed to reach out, brushing against unseen hearts, reminding them of quiet moments, of small joys, of memories that made life worth living. She smiled. Not because the melody was perfect, but because of how it made her feel. The music had a way of speaking where words could not. It lifted her spirits, and she sensed, reached outward to touch the lives of others, even if she couldn't see them. Her mind wandered to a small cafe she had passed the day before, where an elderly man had paused by the window, lost in thought. She imagined the tune finding its way there, carrying with it a little spark of hope. As the morning wore on, she began to play with more confidence. The simple tune started to grow, taking small detours into playful sequences, then returning to the gentle rhythm that had first guided her hands. She didn't know if anyone else would ever hear this music, but she didn't care. There was something deeply satisfying in the act itself, in the way the piano seemed to listen and respond to her, and the way it seemed to encourage her to keep going. Memories rose like gentle waves. She thought of her younger days, when music had been a private escape, a companion in moments of loneliness. Her family had loved her, yes, but they never truly understood the way music could shape emotions or soothe unseen wounds. In school, she had been quiet, often overlooked, yet music had given her a voice. Even when she had stumbled through awkward performances, even when her hands had trembled in front of an audience, the piano had always been patient. Now, sitting here alone, she felt a sense of freedom she hadn't felt in years. A soft knock at the door made her pause. She looked up, startled, unsure if anyone had been watching or if she had imagined it. When she opened the door, no one was there, only the empty hallway and a faint smell of morning air drifting in. It was enough, though, to remind her that life continued beyond this small room, that there were other people living, working, struggling, and smiling just like her. Perhaps they needed the music too. Even if they didn't know it yet, she returned to the piano, letting her fingers wander over the keys. The tune changed subtly, adding small flourishes here and there, each one a reflection of her thoughts and feelings. Sometimes the music took on a playful tone, as if teasing the quiet walls around her. Sometimes it became reflective, almost melancholy, a reminder of the weight she had carried. And through it all, she kept smiling, because she realized that even the heaviest moments could be softened by something as simple as a melody. Hours passed, though it didn't feel that way. The sun climbed higher, casting brighter light into the room, and shadows shifted across the walls. She played through lunch, her mind wandering between memories, dreams, and the small details of everyday life. She thought about people she had met briefly. The barista, who always remembered her order, the mail carrier, who greeted her with a nod, the old neighbor who once shared stories of his youth. Each person had a story, a struggle, a joy, and she felt a gentle connection through the music she played. By mid-afternoon, she realized she hadn't touched her phone or looked at the clock. The world outside continued, but inside the small room, time was hers. She allowed herself to explore the tune more deeply, experimenting with rhythms and harmonies she hadn't dared to try before. Sometimes the notes clashed, sometimes they soared perfectly, and each moment felt like discovery. She began to imagine performing for a larger audience one day. Not for fame, but for the simple joy of sharing what had been locked inside her all these years. Then, a soft voice called from outside the window. Surprised, she looked up to see a young child standing there, eyes wide and curious. The child didn't speak, only listened, mesmerized by the gentle flow of the music. Her heart swelled. She motioned for the child to come closer, and they sat quietly on the floor near the piano, listening together. For the first time, she felt the tune had reached beyond herself, touching another life directly. The child's eyes sparkled with wonder, and that simple smile returned a warmth she had never expected. She realized then that music was not just an escape or a hobby. It was a bridge. It connected hearts, carried emotion, and spoke when words failed. The simple tune she had played, born from quiet mornings and hidden moments, had become something more. It had the power to change a mood, to lift a spirit, to bring people closer even when distance or circumstance kept them apart. Even as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the room in soft amber tones, she continued to play. She imagined the simple tune traveling farther, carried by the wind, carried in memory, carried in imagination. Perhaps someone, somewhere, would hum the notes without knowing where they came from. And for a moment, they would feel lighter, happier. Understood by evening, she paused, resting her hands on the worn keys. The melody lingered in the air like a gentle promise. She smiled again, feeling a sense of quiet accomplishment and connection. The world outside remained complex and challenging, but in that room, with the simple tune echoing softly, there was clarity, warmth, and hope. And she knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning of something remarkable. Something that had the potential to change not only her life, but the lives of those who heard and felt it. The room was silent now except for the faint echoes of her music, but she could still feel it around her, as if it had taken on a life of its own. She lingered for a moment, absorbing the peace that filled the space, and then quietly left the room, closing the door behind her. Carrying a gentle smile and a heart full of music into the rest of the world, the next morning arrived quietly. With a soft drizzle pattering against the windows, she woke early, the simple tune from yesterday lingering in her mind like a whisper she couldn't forget. She stretched and sat on the edge of her bed, her thoughts moving through memories and dreams, wondering how something as simple as a few notes on a piano could leave such a strong impression on her heart. There was a sense of purpose now, a feeling that her music was meant for more than just empty rooms. She dressed quickly, choosing comfort over style, and made her way to the small kitchen to prepare breakfast. The smell of brewing coffee and toasted bread filled the air. As she ate, she reflected on the previous day, remembering the young child at the window and the quiet smile they had shared. Something about that moment made her heart beat faster, a mixture of joy, curiosity, and a gentle longing. It was as if the music had opened a door she hadn't known existed, a door that led to connection and understanding. After breakfast, she returned to the piano. The room was dim, lit only by the soft light that filtered through the curtains. She rested her hands on the keys and began to play again, letting the familiar tune rise slowly from her fingers. But this time, she allowed herself to explore it more freely, letting emotion guide the rhythm and melody. The music flowed in gentle waves, rising and falling like the tide. Each note a small expression of thought and feeling she hadn't been able to put into words before. Hours passed without her noticing. She became immersed in the sound, imagining the melody traveling beyond her room, to streets, homes, and hearts she had never met. The piano seemed alive, responding to the subtle shifts in her mood, offering warmth and comfort with every chord. Occasionally she would stop, listen to the quiet after a sequence of notes, and then continue, as if conversing with the instrument itself. Each pause was a breath, a moment of reflection, before the music continued its gentle journey. She remembered her childhood teacher, an older woman, who had recognized her potential but never forced her to perform. The teacher had simply encouraged her to explore, to feel, and to trust her instincts. She realized now how valuable that advice had been. She had learned to listen deeply, not just to the music, but to herself. Her life had been shaped by quiet moments like these, moments where understanding grew not through instruction but through experience and patience. Later, she decided to take a walk. The rain had stopped, leaving the air fresh and cool. She carried a small umbrella and walked along familiar streets, listening to the city waking up around her. Children played on the sidewalks, vendors set up their carts, and neighbors exchanged friendly greetings. She felt a gentle connection with the world, a sense that everything was alive with small stories and small joys. Each interaction, no matter how brief, added texture to her day, and she thought about how her music might touch these moments in ways she couldn't yet see. Passing by the small cafe she had noticed before, she peeked inside. The room smelled of coffee and fresh pastries, and the soft murmur of conversation filled the space. The elderly man from yesterday was there again, seated near the window reading a newspaper. He looked up as she entered, and their eyes met for a brief, knowing moment. She smiled, and he nodded politely, a small gesture that made her heart feel light. It was strange how simple connections paired with music could make the world feel warmer, more open and alive. She found a quiet spot in the cafe and sipped her coffee slowly, letting her mind wander. Her thoughts returned to the piano and the simple tune that had started everything. She realized she wanted more than to play for herself. There was a need to share this music, to see if it could touch others as it had touched her. But fear crept in, a quiet whisper reminding her of awkward performances and small failures from the past. Still, she pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on the possibility of hope and connection. By afternoon, she returned home, the tune still humming softly in her mind. She opened the piano, letting her fingers glide over the keys. Today she tried something new, layering the melody with gentle harmonies and subtle variations. Each note seemed to carry a deeper meaning, reflecting not only her feelings but the textures of the world outside. She imagined the tune drifting to the cafe, to the children playing in the streets, to anyone who might need a small moment of comfort or joy. It was almost as if the music itself had a purpose beyond her own understanding. A knock at the door startled her. When she opened it, a neighbor stood there, a young woman with a warm smile and a small notebook in her hands. "I heard you playing yesterday," the neighbor said softly. "It was beautiful. I wanted to thank you." She blinked in surprise. "You heard it?" "Yes," the neighbor replied, her voice quiet but earnest. "I was passing by your window and it stopped me. I don't usually come out like this, but your music. It made me feel something I haven't felt in a long time." They spoke for a while, sharing small stories about life, music, and the little moments that often go unnoticed. She realized how much people longed for connection, even in fleeting ways. The neighbor left with a promise to return, and she felt a sense of warmth and possibility she hadn't known she could feel. Music had become more than sound. It was a bridge. A way to reach out and touch someone's life in a real, tangible way. Evening arrived, casting long shadows across her room. She sat at the piano again, feeling a quiet determination. The simple tune from yesterday had grown into something Mara's story, a journey, a companion for those willing to listen. She played with care, with intention, each note carrying not only her feelings, but a hope that it could bring a little light to someone else's day. As she played, memories of past struggles surfaced, times when she had felt invisible, when her efforts seemed unnoticed, when small failures felt enormous. But the music reminded her that beauty could be found even in the quietest corners of life. Every note was a testament to resilience, to patience, and to the gentle power of persistence. She smiled, knowing that even the simplest tune could carry these lessons forward. Night fell, and the room grew quiet. The piano sat still, but the memory of the music lingered, as did the feeling of hope that had grown stronger over the day. She felt ready to share more, to explore further, and to see where the music could lead. Her life was no longer just a series of small, unnoticed moments. It was becoming a path filled with possibility, connection, and joy, all sparked by a simple tune that had changed everything. The following morning carried a soft warmth, the sunlight slipping gently through half-open curtains. She woke with the memory of yesterday's conversations lingering, and a sense of anticipation she could not fully name. The piano seemed to hum faintly from across the room, waiting for her touch, as though it, too, knew that the day held something special. She dressed quickly and moved toward it, feeling a renewed energy that had settled in her chest overnight. She began with the simple tune once more, her fingers brushing the keys lightly at first. But today, she let her imagination guide the music. She added subtle variations, lifting certain notes, softening others, creating gentle crescendos that mirrored the rise and fall of her emotions. As she played, she imagined faces, some she knew, some she had never met, smiling, listening, feeling the echo of her small but determined joy. The music became more than melody. It was a bridge between her inner world and the vast, unseen world outside her room. Midway through her morning, a soft knock interrupted her concentration. A neighbor from a few doors down stood in the doorway, hesitating, holding a small, hand-carved box. "I wanted to show you this," the neighbor said. Inside the box were tiny, delicate wind chimes, handcrafted with care. "I thought maybe they could accompany your music," she added with a shy smile. The gesture surprised her, bringing warmth and quiet wonder to her heart. Without words, she invited the neighbor in, and together they positioned the chimes near the window. When the next note rang out on the piano, the chimes joined in with a delicate harmony, adding a new layer to her melody that filled the room like sunlight. She found herself thinking about her past, about moments she had hidden from others, the times when she had doubted herself, and the times when music had rescued her from quiet despair. Memories of her childhood came back in flashes: the first piano lesson, the small triumphs, the small failures that had taught her patience and persistence. She realized now that all those moments had led her here, to a place where her music could touch other hearts, even in subtle ways. The realization made her smile, a quiet, contented smile that reflected a deep understanding of life's unpredictable beauty. By late morning, the small room was filled with a warm, glowing energy. She noticed a few people passing by the window and slowed her playing, letting the sound drift outward like an invitation. A man walking his dog paused, tilting his head to listen. Two children on bicycles stopped momentarily, ears alert, their faces bright with curiosity. Even from a distance, the music seemed to create a subtle connection, binding strangers together in a shared moment of awareness and calm. She felt a sense of responsibility, a gentle understanding that her music carried power beyond what she had imagined. When noon came, she decided to step outside, taking her small notebook to record ideas and impressions. She wandered the neighborhood, watching life unfold in quiet rhythms: the baker arranging fresh bread, an elderly couple tending a small garden, children laughing as they chased each other along the sidewalks. Everywhere she looked, there were stories, small joys, and small struggles intertwined. She jotted down notes, not for performance, not for anyone else, but for herself, capturing thoughts and feelings that might later find expression in her music. A few hours into her walk, she reached the park near the center of town. She found a bench under a tall tree and sat, closing her eyes briefly to listen to the sounds around her. Birds chirped softly, leaves rustled in the breeze, and the distant hum of traffic was gentle and unobtrusive. She imagined these sounds blending with her simple tune, a natural orchestra of everyday life. Her fingers tapped the notebook, sketching lines of melody, small rhythms, ideas for harmonies that would one day grow into fuller pieces. She felt a spark of excitement at the possibilities, at the thought that her music could expand beyond the confines of her small room. Returning home in the late afternoon, she was surprised to see the young child from the window yesterday waiting near her doorstep. The child held a small toy, a tiny wooden bird. "I wanted to listen again," the child said simply, eyes wide with eagerness. She smiled and invited the child inside. Sitting together on the floor, she played the simple tune once more. The child's eyes shone, their tiny hands clapping softly to the rhythm. There was an innocence in the way the child experienced the music. It's an honesty that reminded her why she had started playing in the first place. In that moment, she realized that music could reach hearts in ways words never could, speaking directly to emotion, memory, and imagination. Evening approached, casting long shadows across the room. She placed her hands on the piano, letting the notes flow more freely than ever. She imagined the melody traveling farther, beyond windows and streets, beyond the park and the cafe, reaching into the hearts of those who might need it most. She felt a quiet sense of hope that even the briefest moment of listening could change a day, even if only by a small margin. She played until her fingers grew tired and then paused, listening to the lingering echoes that filled the quiet room. Night fell, and the neighborhood grew still. She looked out the window, imagining the simple tune drifting into the distance, carrying warmth, comfort, and connection. She felt a sense of accomplishment, but not pride. It was a quiet satisfaction. Born of understanding that her music was more than sound, it was a gift she could offer to the world. And in doing so, she could also give herself a gift. The knowledge that even small, simple actions could make life richer and more meaningful. Before heading to bed, she wrote in her notebook, reflecting on the day's experiences and the feelings that had surfaced. She jotted down ideas for new variations on the tune, small motifs she wanted to explore, thoughts about ways to share her music with others. The act of writing and planning, combined with the simple act of playing, gave her a sense of purpose, a feeling that each day could hold discovery, connection, and growth. As she lay in bed that night, she felt a quiet anticipation for the next day. She thought about the people she had seen, the connections she had begun to make, and the possibilities that lay ahead. The simple tune had become more than a melody, it had become a symbol of hope, a thread weaving through her days, connecting her to others, and reminding her that even in the quietest moments, there was magic, there was joy, and there was life waiting to be touched and shared. Morning arrived with a gentle breeze flowing through the small room, carrying the scent of wet earth from overnight rain. She woke feeling a quiet excitement, a sense that today could bring something new. The piano sat in the corner, familiar and patient, as if waiting for her to arrive. She stretched her arms and slowly approached it, her fingers brushing the keys lightly. Feeling the comforting texture beneath her touch, she began with the simple tune, letting it rise naturally. Today, she allowed her thoughts to wander, imagining the stories of those who might hear her music, the joys and challenges hidden behind the faces she passed on the streets. With each note, she tried to capture not only her feelings, but the lives of others, the hopes, fears, and quiet victories that made up the human experience. The music grew richer, deeper, as she layered soft harmonies and experimented with timing, making the simple melody her own, yet universal at the same time. Mid-morning, there was a gentle knock at the door. She opened it to find an older man, carrying a small leather-bound notebook. "I heard you playing," he said quietly, his eyes soft and earnest. "It reminded me of something I used to do when I was younger. Could I share something with you?" She nodded, curious, and he handed her the notebook. Inside were sketches of melodies, handwritten notes, and memories tied to songs he had loved in his youth. She sat down and leafed through the pages, realizing that her music had inspired him to share something deeply personal. It was a small but powerful connection, a reminder that music could bridge generations and experiences. The afternoon light shifted, filling the room with a warm glow. She continued to play, letting her fingers dance over the keys, imagining how the notes might reach beyond her small home. Outside, the sounds of the city created a subtle rhythm, the laughter of children, the hum of traffic, the occasional bark of a dog. She incorporated these rhythms into her music, blending the piano's melody with the world around her. The result was something alive, breathing, and constantly changing, a tune that reflected the unpredictability and beauty of life itself. She paused to drink water, then picked up her notebook, writing down new ideas and variations for her simple tune. Some were small changes in rhythm, others were subtle shifts in melody that added depth and emotion. She imagined performing this version for others, not for applause or recognition, but for the quiet joy of sharing something meaningful. The act of writing and planning, paired with playing, gave her a sense of purpose she had not felt in years. Later, she decided to visit the small cafe again. The young child from the window yesterday was there, along with a few other regulars. She set up a small area in a quiet corner and began to play. The room filled with her simple tune, and the reaction was immediate. People paused in their conversations, heads turned toward the music, and a calm hush settled over the cafe. Faces softened, eyes brightened, and even the barista paused mid-task to listen. She smiled quietly, knowing that the music was creating a shared space of peace and connection. After the cafe visit, she walked through the nearby park. The sun was warm, and the air smelled of flowers and grass. Children ran and played, parents chatted on benches, and she imagined the simple tune blending with the natural sounds of the park. She found a quiet bench under a large tree and began to play on her small portable keyboard she had brought along. The notes floated into the air, catching the attention of passers-by. A small group gathered, listening in silence, some smiling, some nodding along with the rhythm. The music created a subtle but powerful community, uniting strangers for a few precious moments. Evening fell slowly, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. She returned home, tired but fulfilled. She sat at the piano once more, reflecting on the day. The music had not only reached others, but had also deepened her understanding of herself. She realized that her simple tune could carry joy, comfort, and hope, not only for listeners, but for herself as well. It was a reminder that even small acts could ripple outward in ways that were unexpected and profound. As night settled in, she prepared for bed, but her mind remained alive with ideas. She wrote in her notebook, planning new variations, new ways to connect through music. She imagined teaching children in the park, performing in the cafe more regularly, or even sharing recordings with people who could not leave their homes. Each idea was a small possibility, a chance to expand the simple tune's reach. Lying in bed, she thought about the people she had touched today, the older man with his notebook, the child in the window, the cafe patrons, and the strangers in the park. Each connection was a reminder of the invisible threads that tied people together. Music had become her way of acknowledging those threads, of speaking to the hearts of others without words. She smiled softly, feeling a quiet contentment and a growing determination to continue this journey. Sleep came slowly, filled with dreams of melodies and rhythms, of faces smiling, and of small acts of kindness carried on the wings of music. She felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that each day could hold discovery, connection, and joy. The simple tune that had started as a quiet, private expression had become a bridge connecting hearts, lifting spirits, and bringing light into ordinary lives. Tomorrow would bring new experiences, new people, and new ways for her music to reach the world. And she felt ready to embrace it all with an open heart. The morning light came gently, casting a warm glow across the small room where the piano waited. She woke with a sense of anticipation she couldn't quite name. The simple tune, now familiar and comforting, played softly in her mind even before her fingers touched the keys. She stretched, feeling energy and excitement that seemed to fill her from head to toe. Today, she knew, could be a day of change, of deeper connection, sharing her music in ways she had only imagined. She approached the piano, brushing her fingers lightly across the keys. The tune rose slowly, familiar and yet evolving. Each note carried her feelings, her thoughts, and a quiet hope. The music filled the room with a gentle warmth that seemed almost tangible, reaching into the corners of her heart, and she imagined into the hearts of anyone who might hear it. She played with freedom and confidence, letting the melody speak where words could not. As she played, memories, surface memories of quiet afternoons alone, of first lessons, of moments when music had saved her from doubt or fear. She remembered the people who had touched her life in subtle ways. From the neighbor with the handcrafted chimes, to the child at the window, to the older man with his notebook. All of them had become part of her story, part of the tapestry woven by her music. The thought made her smile, soft and contented. She continued to explore the tune. Mid-morning, there was a soft knock on the door. She opened it to find a small group gathered outside, neighbors, friends, and a few people she had never met. Some held small instruments, others had notebooks, and all of them wore expressions of curiosity and anticipation. "We wanted to hear you play again," one of them said softly. She felt a wave of emotions, surprise, joy, and a quiet nervousness, but she nodded and invited them in. The small room became alive with energy as she played. The simple tune filled the space, now joined by gentle harmonies from a small flute, soft percussion from a tambourine, and the warm resonance of a violin. The music grew richer, deeper, and more vibrant, yet the essence remained the same, a simple melody that carried emotion, connection, and hope. She watched as faces softened, smiles appeared, and eyes glimmered with quiet wonder. The tune was no longer just hers. It belonged to everyone present, a shared moment of beauty and understanding. She paused briefly, letting the music fade into gentle silence. There was a soft murmur of appreciation, and she felt a warmth spreading through her chest. One by one, people shared small stories about how her music had touched them, how it reminded them of forgotten dreams, or how it had brought a little light into difficult days. She listened quietly, moved by the honesty and vulnerability of each voice. Music had created this space, and in that space, people connected not through words alone, but through shared feeling and experience. After a while, she and the small group moved outside. The sun was high, the air filled with the scent of flowers and grass. She played the simple tune again on her portable keyboard. The neighbors joined in, clapping, singing, and adding their own rhythms. People passing by paused to listen, some smiling, some stopping entirely, caught in the quiet magic of the moment. Even strangers felt included, drawn together by something as intangible and powerful as music. She realized then that her simple tune had grown into a communal experience, a living thread that connected lives. Hours passed, yet the music continued, each note carrying warmth and meaning. She noticed the young child from the window dancing with pure joy, their laughter blending seamlessly with the melody. The older man with his notebook nodded along, quietly mouthing the words of forgotten songs. Parents held children close, neighbors exchanged gentle smiles, and she felt a profound sense of purpose and belonging. Her simple tune had become more than music. It had become a lifeline, a source of comfort, joy, and shared humanity. As evening approached, the crowd dispersed slowly, leaving behind soft echoes of laughter, music, and conversation. She returned to the quiet of her home, sitting at the piano once more. The room felt empty and peaceful, the fading light casting long shadows across the floor. She played again, gently this time, letting the music reflect the day's experiences, the connections made, the joy shared, the hope that had been sparked. Each note was a testament to the power of simplicity, patience, and openness. She reflected on how far she had come from playing alone in a quiet room, unsure if anyone would ever hear, to sharing her music with a small but growing community. She realized that her journey was not just about the piano or the tune. It was about the connections, the moments of understanding, and the small joys that could ripple outward into the lives of others. Her smile was quiet but full, a reflection of deep contentment and recognition of the beauty in everyday life. Night fell. She prepared for bed, her hands resting lightly on the piano keys. The simple tune lingered in her mind, a gentle echo of the day's events. A reminder that music could speak where words failed, could touch hearts, and could bring light into lives both near and far. She wrote in her notebook, sketching ideas for tomorrow, planning small acts of sharing and dreaming of new ways to reach others with her music. The possibilities felt endless, and she welcomed them with an open heart as she lay down to sleep. She thought about the people she had touched, the faces she had seen, the laughter and joy that had filled the air. The simple tune had started as a quiet expression of her own heart, but it had grown into something far greater, a source of hope, connection, and warmth. She closed her eyes, carrying the memory of the day with her, and felt a deep sense of peace. Music had changed everything, and in that change, she found herself fully alive, fully connected, and fully ready for whatever tomorrow might bring. Morning came softly, the first light spilling into the room and illuminating the piano with a warm glow. She woke with a quiet sense of purpose, feeling that today could bring something new and unexpected. The simple tune, now familiar to her and to those who had heard it before, hummed in her mind. Carrying the memories of past mornings and the connections she had begun to build, she stretched, feeling energy rippled through her body, approached the piano with a calm focus. She began to play, letting her fingers guide her naturally over the keys. The tune had grown richer over the days, layered with her own variations, harmonies, and improvisations. Today, she wanted to see how far she could let it travel, not just in sound, but in the hearts of people she encountered. Each note carried her hope, her understanding, and her joy, as if speaking directly to those who needed a little light in their day. She closed her eyes, letting the music flow freely, trusting that it would find the right ears. Mid-morning, she decided to take the music outside. She packed her small keyboard and a few personal belongings and walked through the quiet streets, imagining the simple tune reaching every corner. She passed familiar faces, neighbors, shopkeepers, and children playing, and some paused, drawn by the soft strains of melody she carried with her. She felt the warmth of recognition and curiosity, and it encouraged her to keep moving forward. Letting the music float and ripple through the streets like sunlight on water, she reached the central square of the town, a place where people often gathered. Setting up her keyboard, she began to play, letting the simple tune expand and grow. The notes flowed outward, mingling with the sounds of life around her, the laughter of children, the hum of conversation, the rustle of leaves in the breeze. One by one, people stopped, drawn by the music, and formed a small crowd. Some clapped quietly, some swayed to the rhythm, and some simply stood still, listening intently. The tune had become more than melody. It had become a shared experience, a gentle reminder of connection and presence. Among the listeners, she noticed a young girl holding a small sketch pad. She watched as the girl began to draw, her pencil moving quickly to capture the mood and movement inspired by the music. Nearby, an elderly woman hummed along softly, recalling songs from her own past. A man carrying groceries paused, eyes closing for a moment, letting the simple tune wash over him. It was a quiet miracle. She thought the way music, even without words, could reach into lives, sparking small joys and gentle reflections. The hours passed quickly. She added small variations, improvisations, and soft harmonies, letting the tune grow like a conversation between her fingers and the world. People began to interact with one another, smiles and gestures shared. Conversations sparked by the shared experience of listening. A child approached with a small flute, and soon others joined with tambourines, shakers, and even a small guitar. The simple tune became a collaborative effort, growing in depth and beauty with each additional layer, yet retaining the innocence and warmth that had first sparked it. Lunch arrived quietly, and she took a short break, sitting on a bench nearby. She observed the crowd that had formed, people lingering longer than expected, some still tapping their feet or quietly humming. She realized that her music had created a small, temporary community, a space where strangers could connect, share emotion, and simply exist together without judgment. It was a rare and beautiful thing, and she felt privileged to be the one facilitating it, even in a small way. Returning to the keyboard, she played with renewed energy, exploring new possibilities for the melody. She experimented with tempo, rhythm, and dynamics, letting the music tell a story she could not put into words. People around her responded intuitively, adding soft percussion or gentle harmonies, contributing to the evolving tapestry. She realized that music had a way of teaching patience, collaboration, and empathy, as each participant had to listen and respond, shaping the overall experience together. In the mid-afternoon, a few familiar faces from previous days appeared. The older man with his notebook, the neighbor who had shared wind chimes, and the child from the window. Their presence brought a quiet joy, and she welcomed them warmly. Each of them contributed in small ways, whether through rhythm, song, or even just attentive listening. She felt a deep sense of gratitude, realizing that the simple tune had become a bridge across generations, creating connections that transcended age, background, and circumstance. As the day progressed, more people gathered, drawn by the music and the small, welcoming community that had formed around it. Passersby stopped, curious and intrigued, and some joined in, adding instruments or simply clapping and moving with the rhythm. The energy grew organically, a spontaneous celebration of shared experience. She watched faces light up, hands reach out, and laughter spread quietly but powerfully through the space. Her simple tune had blossomed into a collective story, one told without words, yet understood by everyone present. Evening approached, and the lights softened, casting long shadows across the square. She slowed the pace of the music, letting the melody become gentle again, reflective and calm. The crowd settled into a quiet, contemplative mood, listening to the final notes drift into the air. She paused, allowing silence to fill the space for a few precious moments. It was in that silence that she felt the depth of what had been created, the connections, the shared joy, and the subtle transformations that occurred in each person who had listened, participated, or simply watched. Afterward, people lingered for a while, exchanging quiet words and smiles. Some thanked her directly, others nodded in appreciation, and some simply walked away with a subtle but meaningful change in their demeanor. She felt a sense of fulfillment she had never known before, understanding fully that her simple tune had touched lives far beyond what she had imagined when she first sat at the piano alone in her small room. Returning home as night fell, she sat at the piano once more. The day's experiences echoed through her mind, and she played the simple tune gently, letting it reflect the memories of connection and shared moments. She realized that her music had not only reached others, but it also transformed her own life, giving her a sense of purpose, joy, and belonging that extended beyond herself. It was a quiet, profound fulfillment, a confirmation that even the simplest expression could have a ripple effect of immense significance. As she prepared for bed, she wrote in her notebook, recording reflections on the day, new ideas for the melody, and plans for sharing it in other places. She imagined teaching, performing, and creating more opportunities for connection, understanding, and joy through music. The possibilities felt endless, and each thought carried a quiet excitement for the days to come. Lying in bed, she thought about the people she had touched, the smiles she had seen, and the laughter that had filled the air. Her simple tune had become more than a melody, it had become a symbol of connection, hope, and shared humanity. She closed her eyes, feeling a deep peace, knowing that her music would continue to travel, touching lives, creating joy, and building bridges. In that quiet, she slept with a full heart, ready for tomorrow and all the stories that awaited her, carrying the power of a single simple tune that had truly changed everything.